I saw that you are number 9 on Forbes' list of the world's most powerful women. I think that puts you above Beyonce.
It does.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sidekicks Conversations. Today, I'm joined by someone the New York Times has called one of the most powerful women in corporate America. Julie Sweet has been the CEO of Accenture since 2019 and the chair since 2021. At Accenture, Julie leads a global team of more than 700,000 employees, serving more than 9,000 clients in 120 countries around the world, with strategy and management, digital, technology, and operations consulting, including for us right here at T-Mobile. Julie also serves on the World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees, and she's a founding co-chair of Welcome.US's CEO Council, which I'm also a member of, and we'll get a chance to talk about. But first, Julie, welcome to T-Mobile.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's great to be here.
Well, let's start by talking about Accenture's business. First of all, I love Accenture's purpose. I looked it up, and it says, to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And it kind of struck me that with the rate of pace of change in technology, you're helping companies with their most exciting opportunities, but also their most stressful problems. So how does that go, and what do you see happening in technology that really inspires people at Accenture?
Well, probably the first thing is the focus on the human part, because with so much change in technology, actually most of the conversations that I have with clients start with, how do I change? And that always starts with our people. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do you upskill talent? How do you see the opportunities in using technology to get rid of things that are, automate things that are boring and allow people to do things that are more interesting? Because ultimately, if technology is all about a PowerPoint and an idea, that doesn't work very well, and it really does come down to people first. And so that second part of the purpose statement, human ingenuity, is really important. And there's so many things to be excited about.
So many of your clients, obviously they see upside from the changes happening in the technology space, but aren't they also weary of the pace of change and the expense of change? And how do you help them navigate through the difficulties?
Well, the first thing is my first job is to be a straight shooter. And so I first start by saying that there is no end to change. Technology is going to continue to change. The possibilities are going to continue to change. And so organizations have to have change as a muscle. And so if you think about things like the metaverse, I was on the television show where the guy was giving me a hard time. He's like, everything could be done in the metaverse. And I said, yes. That is the answer. So today, for example, we're helping a state with social workers. We built a metaverse to help train social workers who are going in for at-risk children to identify whether their homes are at risk, the kids are at risk. And we're actually using it to have people decide whether they really want to do this job, which is super hard. And they had 50% turnover because people would come in and then say, I can't do this. We've reduced it by 30% just by training them and having them interview in the metaverse. And then now they're going in, they're better able to identify at-risk children and be able to handle sort of the difficulty of dealing with sometimes violence in the home. Those are things that no one could even imagine doing before, and that's just a single use case. And so when you start to look forward, it is why you have to learn to have a culture that embraces change.
I've heard you talk about learning agility and how important it is that people at Accenture demonstrate learning agility. What does that mean? And also, how do you figure that out when you're meeting somebody or interviewing them or developing them, whether they've got it or not?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Outside of work, because I know you learn a lot here, what have you learned in the last 6 months?
So I'm a pilot of seaplanes, and I'm constantly taking training to try to figure out how you can do that, but also stay safe.
So Mike, you are qualified to work at Accenture.
All right, yeah.
I know that is really exciting for you. So we asked...
Put me on the spot.
Exactly. I'm glad you passed. But so we ask everyone, whether you're really senior or just coming out of school. Now, if you're on campus still, we say, other than in your classroom. And the reason is that we believe that if someone can actually answer that they've learned something in the last 6 months. We don't care what it is. Making paella, whatever it is.
Right.
It means that they are curious, that they like to learn, and it's a huge indicator of success because at Accenture, you constantly have to learn. We actually spend over $1 billion a year on training and development, which is a reflection of how important it is. And actually, all of our 700,000 more people have to pass 11 assessments on technology. We call it TQ. Because it's so important to be doing their job, and that will be evergreen, will change over time. And so that very simple question helps us understand, is someone able to learn? Do they like to learn? And that's a really, really good way of training for or assessing for learning agility.
I guess that's not surprising because you're in the business of change. But it is kind of inspiring that you make that so important with every employee, that they're able to help clients and help each other at the firm navigate this ongoing onslaught of change that's facing us. You have also been all about change through your career. Can we talk about your career for a minute?
Sure.
Because you've faced a lot of change. You started out as a lawyer, right, at a big law firm, and then made your way to general counsel, and then ultimately the corner office. I mean, did you have inspirations along the way to make that kind of change, or role models, or mentors, or how did you navigate that significant a change in your career?
Well, actually, I go back to my mom. So my mom was a housewife, and she was married to my dad, who painted cars for a living. And about the time I was in 6th grade, neither of them had gone to college. They said to create a better life for themselves, at least one of them had to get a college degree. And my dad, was working, and my mom wasn't working at the time. And so they said, look, my mom would be the one. So here she was, and this is not common back then. She was, in her late 30s, and she started working part-time because they needed more income. She started going to school, and she was raising 3 kids. And because we didn't have a lot of money, she would stay until midnight sewing our clothes. I mean, she was amazing, right? And I saw her go through that transformation. She actually graduated from college my freshman year in college.
Wow.
Right? And so when I think about, can you transform, I lived that. And I also saw my dad go from being the husband of someone who was staying home and doing all these things to learning to cook, which by the way was a rough transition. But we all survived. And that's where I really started. And they taught me that you can do anything. And believe me, going from being a lawyer who was very paper focused and didn't know anything about technology to running a technology company, that was definitely one of those things where you can do anything is the right answer. But it started when I was a kid.
That's amazing. Can you talk for a minute about leading as a woman? I mentioned in the opening that New York Times recognizes you as one of the most powerful women in corporate America. You are leading one of the world's largest organizations. How does that inform your leadership style, and also the space that Accenture makes for women as leaders?
For me, diversity it's more about not so much being a woman, but understanding diversity sort of writ large and how important it is. I feel like my journey as a leader has been to take my own experiences and recognize that I don't know what I don't know. And so when I became the CEO of North America, moving from general counsel, I had that experience with my African American and Black employees who one of the senior leaders came to speak to me, and he looked at me and he said, "What I'm explaining to you, I've explained it to the last 3 CEOs. I hope you're the last." And what I recognized was I did not understand those experiences, and I needed to invest in that so that I would be the last, because only as a leader can you set an example and really change. And so I feel like I'm still learning, and as I move across the world and you think about diversity from a geographic perspective, a religious perspective, and we know at Accenture that it has been our commitment to diversity that's made us so successful.
You have been a leader on the issue of helping refugees and other people new to the U.S. find economic opportunity here. You're co-chair with Sundar of the Welcome.US CEO Council, which the two of you invited me to join. It's really important work, but it's also work that helps American companies land great talent. Can you talk about the work of, especially this last year, with Ukrainian refugees, as well as Afghan refugees and what the organization's doing to try to help people who arrive here, sometimes under the toughest of circumstances.
Well, I first want to thank you, though, and because you not only answered the call, but you gave us more than we asked for. I remember they were like, well, T-Mobile is going to give, thousands and thousands of phones and plans, and the team had started with a very small ask, and you said there is so much need, and that's amazing, right? And I've seen it through the families that I've personally helped and Accenture has helped, proudly standing with their T-Mobile phone and plan, and it opens up two things. Jobs, because if you do not have a device, you cannot apply. Like, you just simply can't apply anymore. Everything is online. But it also opens up training for English language. So a lot of the women and the families who, we found a lot of the Afghan families, the men speak English, but the women don't. They have to do online training. They cannot attend classes because they have children and they can't leave. And they often would have a device that was very old and couldn't support it. So hugely transformative for these families. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I mean, one of the insights you're saying is that we've found in working with refugees that as soon as you land, obviously you need immediate needs. People need a place to sleep and they need food, et cetera. But in order to create economic opportunity for themselves, almost like the very next thing they need is a mobile phone and a mobile phone connection, because that's what allows them to secure long-term rent. It's what allows them to go look for a job, to get some of the skills that they need, et cetera. So we're trying to see if we can figure out how to get these first 200,000 phones and lines landed with people, and then we'll see what the opportunity is from there. But you're also working with CEOs across the board in various industries who are finding there's a win-win here, right? This is more than just helping people in need. This is also great available labor for certain categories of labor that are very hard to fill with Americans.
Absolutely, and you start with Accenture. So we've hired about 100 refugees over the last year who are fantastic employees, bringing really needed skills at a time when it's a tight labor market. Then you look at companies like Walmart, who've hired a lot of refugees. Really across the board, you have such a broad range of skills at a time when labor is really, really tight. So I really encourage companies, big and small, to be checking out welcome.us, because we've got a portal there where if you have jobs, you can list them, and we help match them to the refugees in the communities.
And that's really the magic of it, right? Because we've got all these people with needs, and we also have companies with needs, and it's about getting everybody matched up so there's a win-win. I love it.
Absolutely.
You said as long as there's a list, it's good to be on it. There's one more list I saw. I saw that you are number 9 on Forbes' list of the world's most powerful women. I think that puts you above Beyonce. So my last question for you is, does this give you any credibility with your teenagers?
It does. It is really because I was above Beyonce. My children do not care about these lists. In fact, I one time had a newspaper with my picture. It was huge, and I laid it out. It was the only time. I usually don't show my children. And it was, I laid it out, and I came down to breakfast.
Just like leave it where they would find it?
Exactly. And like this, they'd shoved it aside. They were making slime. And I was like, okay, I give up. But when I was ranked above Beyonce, they were like, oh, Mom, that's pretty good. So that's it. So.
Well, Julie, thanks for joining us at T-Mobile today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another Sidekicks conversation. I'm Mike Sievert, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.